Next on Unsolved Mysteries. A young man is talking to his fiancée when she is abducted. He tracks her down, but is it too late? Is there a fortune in silver and gold buried beneath the Alamo? One treasure hunter is determined to find out. She seemed like family, a financial advisor who even baked for her clients. But could she be trusted with their hard-earned money? And it seemed like a romance that would last. Could her lover have been her killer? Whether it's murder, larceny, or foul play, sometimes these cases are solved, thanks to you. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Clinton, Missouri. A quiet farming town in the heart of America. Normally, this peaceful region feels insulated from big city crime. But that sense of security was shattered after a popular young woman was abducted and possibly murdered. Angela Hammond was an outgoing 20-year-old known to everyone as Angie. Her fiancé, Rob Schaefer, was a star athlete in high school. When he gave Angie a diamond engagement ring, he promised to always take care of her.
So I'll give you a call later, okay?
Great.
On a warm spring evening, Angie dropped Rob at his house and said that she would call him in a few hours.
That was about 10 o'clock. I was going to meet her back uptown as soon as my mom got home. I was watching my little brother at the time. And she called later on that night.
As promised,
Hello?
Angie later called Rob from a payphone in the center of town, about 7 blocks from his house.
While we were talking on the phone, she mentioned to me about a truck circling around the block.
Keep circling around the block.
An older model green Ford pickup truck.
Do you recognize the truck?
No.
He's probably not from around here. Maybe he's just lost.
I guess so.
Angie was unconcerned until the truck parked by the phone booth.
Rob, he's pulling up next to the phones.
What's the driver look like?
He's kind of dirty looking. He's got a mustache, beard, and glasses, and he's wearing overalls. And he's coming to the phones. The truck is a late model green pickup truck with one of those decals that cover the whole back window. It looks like a lake scene with a fish jumping out of water.
What's he doing now, Angie?
He used the phone next to her, got back in his truck, and looked at something with a flashlight, and he was looking for something. I had her turn around and ask him if he needed to use the phone. Maybe the other phone was broke. And he said no, he was just going to try again in a minute.
No. Maybe I should come down there.
Oh, Rob, no, I'm sure it's okay.
And then we just
So, anyway,
talked about other things. We weren't too worried about it. And that's when I heard her scream on the phone. I ran out of the house, just dropped the phone. I didn't hang the phone back up. When I heard her scream, the only thing that went through my mind is getting up there and finding out what the hell's going on. I saw a pickup truck going past me, and then somebody yelled out the window, "Robbie!" That's how I knew it was them.
As Rob chased the pickup through downtown, he didn't realize that when he threw his car into reverse, the transmission had been severely damaged.
I chased him about 2 miles. The transmission failed. It started dying as I was making my turn to the right. All I saw was his brake lights and dust.
Rob blamed himself for it because he always told her he'd be there to take care of her. And he tried, he did everything that could be done. You know, nobody blames him, but I think he thinks that people blame him.
The beginning's the hardest because you know you were close enough to get him, but she just didn't get the job done. And you still wake up at nights wondering where she's at, wondering what happened, wondering if anybody's still looking. You just wonder all the time.
Angie's kidnapping sent shockwaves through the town. The police and citizens searched far and wide by both air and land, but found nothing. The best hope for cracking the case rested on locating the pickup truck.
We had some assistance from the Missouri State Highway Patrol that did a computer search on all registered vehicles. Through their help, we had like 1,600 possibilities that we had to look after, checking wherever these trucks are at on as far as color and if they had any mural in the back window, with no success.
The police based their investigation on Rob Schaefer's testimony. But when no witnesses could back up his story, Rob himself became a suspect.
I think, you know, it was natural that people wondered, you know, did the boyfriend do it type thing. But my feeling, I've known the kid all his life, and I never doubted for a minute that he had anything to do with it.
Within a week, Rob was cleared. Shortly after, police connected Angie's abduction to 2 other unsolved cases within 100 miles of Clinton. The first had occurred 3 months earlier near Max Creek, Missouri.
Listen, I'm getting ready to close up, but there's a man that's been hanging around outside for a while now, and I'm...
42-year-old Trudy Darby was working alone in a convenience store. She called her son to report a suspicious man loitering outside. Trudy's son hurried to the store, but found it deserted. 2 days later, Trudy Darby was found on a riverbank 10 miles from the store. She had been fatally shot twice in the head. About a month later, 30-year-old Cheryl Ann Kinney was reported missing in Nevada, Missouri, roughly 70 miles from where the body of Trudy Darby had been found. Cheryl Ann Kinney had also vanished from a convenience store where she worked. She has not been seen since. Then, less than 1 month after that, Angie Hammond was abducted.
If Angela's found, it might provide that link if they are related. Maybe that'd be a connection to Trudy Darby, how she was murdered.
Authorities now suspected that a serial killer was on the loose in west central Missouri.
If anybody out there sees anything, you know, if they could put themselves in our place and know how we feel, you know, how heart-wrenching it is that she was taken, even if the guy that took her sees this, if he would just call and let him know what he did with her.
Before she disappeared, Angie described her abductor as a filthy, bearded man who wore glasses and overalls. He was driving a late 1960s or early 1970s two-tone green Ford pickup truck. The back window was completely covered by a decal of a fish jumping out of water, which may look like this. A reward is being offered for leads in this case. If you have any information, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. Next, the search for a treasure of silver and gold that may be buried beneath the legendary Alamo. Remember the Alamo. The famous battle cry was immortalized in history. But for some, the full story of the Alamo has yet to be told. Legend has it that in the shadow of the Alamo's old mission, a treasure remains buried, a secret which dates back to 1836, the year of the famous battle. That January, a group of rugged frontiersmen made their way across southern Texas. By some accounts, they were loaded down with a fortune in silver and gold. The legendary San Saba treasure, said to be worth millions of dollars. The men, led by Colonel Jim Bowie, were headed for the Alamo. The treasure was intended to finance the Texas Revolution for independence from Mexico. 2 months later, Bowie and 188 other men, including Davy Crockett, made a courageous stand against 6,000 well-trained Mexican troops at the Alamo. Not one of the defenders lived to tell the tale. However, the legend of the treasure did survive. Professional fortune hunter and historical researcher Frank Buschbacher first heard about the treasure at the Alamo during a trip to Mexico.
Frank Buschbacher.
He was introduced to Maria Gomez, a respected museum curator who also had a reputation as a psychic.
¿Sabías tú que está un tesoro enterrado en el Álamo?
Did you know that there is a treasure buried at the Alamo?
I'd never heard of any treasure surrounding the Battle of the Alamo. It is just a valiant battle that was lost. Then she went on to describe it as gold coins, artifacts, silver artifacts, religious artifacts.
Frank was told that some of the treasure had been removed by Mexican soldiers, but that most of it still remained hidden at the
Voy a
Alamo.
hacer un mapa.
She's going to draw you a map.
This is Maria's map. She predicted that the treasure would be found here at the bottom of an old well. Even though Maria said that she had never been to the Alamo, she had indicated the spot where a well was dug just before the siege. The well was in the plaza, which was surrounded by 12-foot-tall stone walls. It was within these walls that the Texans held out for a full 13 days. The defenders put down one advance after another, but in the end, 189 men could not hold off 6,000 Mexican soldiers. Frank believes that in a final desperate act, Jim Bowie ordered the treasure to be hidden at the bottom of the well.
Hand it down to me.
This really is the first bank of Texas, the first catch of precious metals that would have bought them the arms and uniforms they needed. The only way they preserve it is to all stick together and fight the battle out to whatever outcome it had. The reason why it's remained there is because everybody died.
Frank believes that the treasure is located beneath the road in front of the chapel. But to many native Texans, his theory doesn't hold up.
The people of the Alamo, I don't think they were guarding a treasure. When your life is on the line, like it was in the battle with General Santana, I don't think you're thinking about silver or gold bullion. I think you're thinking about your life. And I don't think you would be polluting your water well because you don't know how long your siege is going to be.
Despite the controversy, Frank was determined to prove his point. He obtained permission to survey the area with ground-penetrating radar.
Okay, we got a void. So we've got a nice little area there about 3 to 4 meters down. Looks to be maybe a covered-over cistern. That's all strictly conjectured, but this is a very good-looking target.
To their trained eyes, the radar display showed several irregularities beneath the surface. The largest, which Frank believes to be the site of the well, is in the exact location where Maria Gomez predicted the treasure would be found.
It kind of brought all my research to fruition at that point because I knew with the map, her story, and then plugging it into Texas history that I was on a hot trail, and any dissension that I had within my own mind about whether I should follow this any further was gone.
The anomalies could be caused by many things. I think it could be debris, equipment left by the Texans. It could be something several years later that was deposited there. And I think that probably that could be part of what they're picking up out there.
Frank spent 3.5 years acquiring the necessary permits and financing to excavate the site. The archaeology department at St. Mary's University agreed to oversee the project. For project director Thomas Guderjan, Anything that turns up during the excavation will have historical value.
Whether it's treasure, as in gold and silver and that sort of thing, or whether it is materials that were thrown into the well during the battle, materials that were thrown into the well during the cleanup after the battle, doesn't make any difference to us when we're looking at it in a historical perspective. Whatever it is, it's a time capsule.
The plans called for excavating a 15 by 15-foot area directly above the well. A work crew needed to first remove 3 feet of flagstone and roadbed to reach the top of the filled-in well.
I'm interested in what he finds. And if it's a treasure, that'll be very exciting. If it's a cannonball, a part of a cannon, that'll be interesting to know about. It'll be another part of history.
What we do know about that ground is it hasn't been disturbed since the battle. And we have a time capsule down there no matter what it is. And it is a treasure no matter what it is.
4 feet beneath the surface of the courtyard, the team began to find artifacts, fragments of Native American pottery, the bones of butchered animals, and primitive cooking utensils. Each relic had to be carefully unearthed and properly cataloged.
While we haven't been able to move as quickly as we ever originally intended to, the reason is very good reason, because we found something no one expected to find here, and that's intact 18th century materials.
These items are a valuable treasure in themselves, rare artifacts that help piece together a history of the Alamo from the 1750s up to the final battle nearly a century later.
Here we have grape shot. We think this is from the actual battle. We also have this that looks like it is the headpiece to a Mexican soldier's hat. This would signify his unit and that sort of thing. And this may well be part of a saber from the battle.
As the archaeologists inched closer and closer to the irregularities picked up by radar, the discoveries they'd already made gave them hope. But optimism soon turned to disappointment. They found no sign of the treasure. Yet some remain convinced that the gold and silver still exist somewhere beneath the Alamo. And for them, the search will continue. Next, a woman agrees to see an ex-boyfriend one last time and is found murdered. In a quiet neighborhood in Tampa, Florida, Erica Richardson is excited and a bit nervous about her first date with John Fesia.
Thank you.
Erica is shy and hasn't dated much. Fesia has a reputation as a ladies' man, but that night she and Fesia hit it off.
When I first saw them together, they looked nice, and I thought that, you know, they would make a nice couple.
John Fesia swept Erica off her feet, and the two became inseparable. Although some family and friends thought the relationship was moving too fast, Erica was convinced that John was her Mr. Right. She was wrong.
Okay, honey. I am off to the mall, and I will be back in about a couple of hours.
The mall?
Okay? Yeah,
With
we'll go to
who?
the mall.
The trouble started not long after Fesia moved in with Erica.
Well, why not? She's a good friend of mine.
I could see that he was wearing a mask. I discovered him to be a jealous, mean, controlling person. He was just too possessive. He wanted Erica all to himself.
Don't be so paranoid and jealous.
I am not.
Not only was he possessive, he wanted to isolate her, not only from her family, but from friends too.
Over the next several months, the relationship continued to unravel.
Pharmacy.
What took you so long to get to the phone, girl?
John, you cannot continue to call me here at work like this.
Fesia had wild mood swings and frequently called Erica at work, accusing her of being unfaithful.
I have to go, okay?
Fesia moved out of the house, but his erratic behavior continued.
Who's that?
He began showing up at Erica's work unannounced, harassing and threatening her.
What are you doing here?
Don't try to get smart with me.
Erica was really afraid of John because of the threats, what he said he would do to her.
Erica filed a restraining order. Still, Feisha showed up at her house at all hours. Finally, with the help of her father, she found the courage to call the police and have him arrested. Despite the threat of jail time, Feisha continued to stalk Erica.
So I'm just gonna go home tonight.
One Saturday, a few weeks before Christmas, Erica met her mother at a local mall to do some shopping.
Hey, babe. Come here.
Don't worry, Ma, I can handle it, okay?
I miss you.
You miss me, and?
I just want to talk, that's all.
Erica's mother didn't hear much of the conversation, but she wasn't surprised when her daughter agreed to meet with Feisha that afternoon.
I don't know.
Well, John was a type person that he could sweet talk a lady, and he made promises that, you know, things were going to get better. He was going to do better. And, of course, she took him at his word.
Sunday came and went, and Imogene heard nothing from Erica.
I didn't hardly sleep that night thinking about it. Monday morning, I called Erica's house, and I didn't get an answer. So I called her job.
She had not shown up at the pharmacy, and she hadn't called in. Concerned, Imogene went to Erica's house.
John's pickup truck was in the driveway. I went to the door, and that's when I looked in the window. And nothing seemed to have been disturbed. I started to my car, and something told me to go back.
Erica!
And I looked through another window, and that's when I saw a knife and blood. And I knew then something had happened to my daughter.
Minutes later, police confirmed Imogene's worst fears. Erica had been stabbed to death.
Erica was my daughter, my friend. She was successful. She was bright. She was caring, loving. She was just a daughter that any mother would love to have. When I lost Erica, I lost part of me.
There were some articles that were strewn about the home which were indicative of a struggle. There were no items of value that appeared to us at that point in time missing from the home, indicating to us that someone maybe she knew might have been in the home. We found, of course, Erica Richardson's blood, but we also found the blood of a second party mixed in with her blood.
Detectives suspected the blood of the second party belonged to Feisha, but they couldn't prove it without a sample of his DNA. Feisha's fingerprints were all over the crime scene, but that wasn't considered evidence since he had lived in the same house. There was one solid lead. An eyewitness reported seeing Feisha driving Erica's 1992 Honda a short time after she was killed.
We issued the warrant for his arrest based on those facts. The vehicle was ultimately located on December 23rd in Lafayette, Louisiana, where he has a lot of family and friends.
Detectives questioned Feisha's family, but they insisted that they hadn't seen him in several weeks. Today, John Feisha is still on the run. He is wanted for grand theft auto and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, and he remains the #1 suspect in the murder of Erica Richardson. Update. John Feisha has been found, but not in a manner anyone expected. FBI and state authorities matched DNA from the Erica Richardson crime scene to that of an unidentified body in a Louisiana morgue. The corpse, known as John Doe A98-071, had been pulled from a local river 4 months after Erica was murdered. However, another 10 years would pass before DNA technology allowed the match to finally be made. The dead man was John Fesia. Authorities are convinced that Fesia killed Erica Richardson, and they have now closed that case. However, Fesia himself was murdered, and his case remains open. If you have any information about the death of John Fesia, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. Next, she seems like a cute little old lady, but she's really a cunning crook. You know, most of us consider ourselves pretty decent judges of character. We think we'd know a crook if we saw one. But con artists come in all shapes, sizes, and ages. Beverly Hills, California.
Morning, everybody. Come on out, Katie.
For 2 years, this grandmotherly con artist ran what appeared to be a successful investment business. But she was hiding illegal activities behind a mask of Southern hospitality and homemade fruitcake. This devious criminal made off with $3 million of her investors' money.
You couldn't help but like her, and when you looked at the woman, she was so smooth and trusting and very soft sell that you thought of as almost family. She never lost her touch in the kitchen. I mean, I'm not a big fruitcake lover, but they were delicious, to be honest with you.
As you see, this carpeting is so beautiful, isn't it?
Gertrude Pruett claimed that her investment opportunities came from special connections with carpet factories and textile mills in the South.
And we have pre-sold a large order to a hotel chain.
What impressed me the most was that although the returns seemed almost too good to be true, Gertrude seemed like such a loving, sincere person that it was a legitimate investment and that she could do no harm to her investors.
Well, of course you should give it some thought. I think it would be nice if you would talk to Cecil about it a little more.
Gertrude took good care of her clients. She often hired limousines to bring them to her posh office. One investor was a woman we'll call Myrna.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Myrna Patterson. I have an Gertrude selected a really magnificent outlay for just selling carpets. I mean, this was 2 stories high. Well, my first impression of Gertrude was that she was standing there sizing me up.
Mrs. Patterson. How nice to meet you.
And then because she was so cordial, she was Southern and warm, that I forgot all about the fact that I was being sized up and just entered into her world of how bright she was and how able she was.
A wonderful business opportunity for you. Have you?
I originally invested about $20,000. But as I watched the operation from the balance sheets that were coming out monthly and watched the fact that people were getting their interest, I invested more.
And this is my secretary, Jennifer.
Well, Gertrude really was the office, handling the customers, handling the money. And Harold was in his office, but what he was doing, I never knew.
Gertrude's 40-year-old son, Harold, was her partner in the business, but he had very little contact with the clients. He was described as a bad-tempered, unfriendly man, much different than his sweet Southern mother.
Even though I was Gertrude and Harold's banker for 2.5 years, I never really met Harold for almost the first 1.5 years. He was the kind of a person who you would not have trusted or bought a car from, you might say.
Myrna had already invested $100,000 before she became suspicious that something was wrong.
That check you gave me, it bounced. I just came from the bank. They said insufficient funds.
Oh, I don't believe that.
Well, I do. I just came from the bank.
I know what happened.
Sick as I was, inside, I was still playing it like a friend, which I thought she was.
Myrna just could not believe that this charming woman could be conning her. But instead of pressing the issue, she ended up taking home a fruitcake and accepting a lunch date.
Thank you. Oh, we put you to some trouble. So how about lunch next week?
But Myrna wasn't the only investor to receive a bad check. The office was flooded with dozens of angry calls. Gertrude and Harold were conveniently unavailable. Finally, an employee named Cecil Trueshell secretly contacted the Pruett's accountant. Cecil had discovered that the financial statements Gertrude was showing investors were completely different than the accountant's records.
Well, Steve, that can only mean that statements are fraudulent. It was at that particular period of time I knew that there were serious problems, and I just didn't know where they had been stashing money. Okay, I'll get back to you. Bye. So at night, sometimes between the wee bitty hours of 1 and 3, I made midnight raids. I found every canceled check, every statement that had been paid, everything that I could remove out of that office. And by the end of the time, I had about 4 cardboard boxes full of stuff.
Because Cecil's friends and family also invested money with the Pruetts, he confronted Harold with his evidence.
Harold, I've got enough evidence to prove that this whole company's a phony. He told me all of the people had done nothing but made investments, and there was a risk to be made. And I looked at him and I said to him, Harold, they made an investment on a pack of lies that you have presented to them, and that's called fraud.
Cecil reported Harold and Gertrude to the police, but by then both had disappeared, taking their investors' money with them. Eventually, the FBI tracked down Harold and brought him to trial. None of the investors' money was ever recovered, and sweet, motherly Gertrude was nowhere to be found.
It was really amazing that Gertrude would leave Harold behind to take the rap. Everybody thought that Harold was a little bit of a hard character, but Gertrude still was the sweet, loving mama. And when she failed to show up and became a fugitive, everybody was surprised.
I've read every one of the letters that came into...
Based on the testimony of 10 victims, Harold was convicted on 20 counts of mail fraud. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison and was released after serving 51 months. But his mother remained a wanted fugitive. Update. Gertrude Pruett was captured in Bakersfield, California. Just minutes after this story aired, the FBI received several calls from viewers who recognized Pruett. 5 days later, she was arrested at a residence where she was working as a live-in housekeeper under the assumed name Martha Gray. Gertrude Pruett pleaded guilty to 7 counts of mail fraud. She was ordered to pay restitution to her investors and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Gertrude Pruett has since passed away. Coming up, 3 different women disappear after a dinner date with the same man. On a previous broadcast, we examined the case of Annie Hearin, wife of Robert Hearin Sr., one of the wealthiest men in Mississippi. One afternoon, a kidnapper abducted Annie Laurie from her home in Jackson and left behind a bizarre ransom
John,
note.
you need to take a look at this.
It demanded that her husband Robert pay money to 12 people. All had been sued by a company that he controlled. Neighbors said that they saw a suspicious white van with Florida license plates driving by the Hearin home just before the kidnapping. Robert Hearin held a press conference and made a personal plea to the kidnapper for his wife's safe return.
My children and I appeal to whomever has my wife that she may be safely returned to us. Thank you.
8 days later, Robert received a letter postmarked Atlanta, Georgia. He recognized the handwriting as his wife's.
Bob, if you don't do what these people want you to do, they are going to seal me up in the cellar of this house with only a few jugs of water. Please save me.
Robert sent out checks totaling nearly $1 million to the people named on the kidnapping list. He never again heard from the kidnapper or from his wife. Update. Newton Alfred Wynn was arrested by the FBI in Florida on charges related to the abduction of Annie Hearin. Wynn was a lawyer who had prior business dealings with Robert Hearin and was one of the 12 people named in the ransom note. Less than 1 month before the kidnapping, Wynn had purchased the van which matched the description of the vehicle seen in the Hearin neighborhood. A Florida woman also told police that 16 days after Annie Laurie was kidnapped, Wynn paid her $500 to fly to Atlanta and mail a letter. She identified the letter as the same one Robert Hearin received from his wife. Newton Alfred Wynn was convicted of conspiracy to kidnap, extortion by mail, and perjury. He was sentenced to 19 years and 7 months in prison and has since been released. Annie Laurie has never been found. Robert Hearin has since died. However, his family continues to hope that the case will someday be solved. If you have any information about the kidnapping of Annie Laurie Hearin or what might have happened to her, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. In Las Vegas, Nevada, real estate agent Cynthia Jabor plans to have dinner with her boyfriend. She intends to end their 6-year relationship. That evening, Cynthia disappears. 5 years later, in San Diego, California, Carol Ann Riley has a dinner date with her boyfriend. Like Cynthia Jabor, Carol also intends to end the relationship. That evening, Carol disappears. In Las Vegas, Cynthia's dinner date was with this man, Robert Weeks. Carol vanished after having dinner with this man, Robert Smith. Smith and Weeks are one and the same person. Cynthia Jabor was last seen at 10:30 p.m. in the lobby of this Las Vegas condo where Robert Weeks lived. It was the night Cynthia planned to tell Weeks that their romance was over.
The relationship between Bob Weeks and Cynthia had been an on and off affair for the last 6 years. And she always said she would never marry him. My husband always said he has shifty eyes. And he did. His eyes were very cool and calculating. And Cynthia always said, I can handle Bob. Don't worry, I can handle Bob.
Hello, you've reached the residence of Cynthia Jabor.
When Susan didn't hear from Cynthia for 2 days, she became worried and called her apartment. No one answered. With the help of a locksmith and a security guard, she forced her way into Cynthia's apartment.
Let me go first.
The whole experience was a very, very strange and eerie feeling for me. Cynthia? Cynthia, are you here? On the one hand, I knew I had to do it. And on the other hand, I was very afraid that Cynthia may be murdered. What went through my mind was that she was either with Bob Weeks in Northern California, and on a whim, maybe she had left and not told anybody, or he had done something to her.
5 years later in San Diego, the same thing happened. On the day that she disappeared, Carol Ann Riley spoke to a friend about her dinner date with Robert Smith and said that she planned to end the relationship that evening.
She had just decided he was not the kind of person she was interested in being acquainted with. And to have to tell him that she didn't want that she in fact was leaving town, that she in fact was getting married to someone else, she was just afraid would be an awkward, difficult thing to explain to him.
When they couldn't reach Carol by phone, her family and friends hired a private investigator. 2 days later, he searched her apartment.
As I walked through Carol's apartment, I felt some uncertainty. All along, the family had been asking if I felt that Carol was dead. And it was unpleasant for me to have to tell them that I did, in fact, feel that Carol was dead.
There were other similarities in the two cases. 6 days after Cynthia vanished, her car was found in a Las Vegas hotel parking lot. A few days after Carol disappeared, her car was found in the parking lot of a San Diego hotel. More evidence was found in Robert Weeks's personal diary. Cynthia had been dating a man named Art, and Weeks wrote, quote, "Cynthia and Art dead for sure. Cynthia and Art dead. Damn you." But Cynthia and Carol weren't Weeks's only victims. Earlier, his wife Patricia had disappeared just a few weeks after she filed for divorce. Like the others, her abandoned car was also discovered in a parking lot.
When I found out who Robert Smith really was and that other people in his past had disappeared, my first reaction was, the son of a gun has done it again. I was just like horrified that he's gotten away with it one more time.
When Weeks was questioned by police in San Diego, he claimed that the women had canceled the dates and that he had no idea what happened to them. Because no bodies were found, the police could not charge him with murder. Weeks immediately disappeared, and a warrant was issued for unlawful flight for other crimes in Nevada. Update. The day after this story aired, Robert Weeks was captured in Arizona. His girlfriend turned him in after she saw our broadcast. Viewers also called a television station in Tucson, saying that they recognized Weeks as a local businessman named Charles Stolzenberg. He was running a company called Snuff It, which made ashtrays. His business partner was interviewed shortly after the arrest.
He said, "I haven't told anybody this yet, but I watched that program." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I watched it, but I didn't figure any of my friends would be watching it."
Weeks was brought back to Nevada on a prior embezzlement charge. Shortly thereafter, he was indicted on 2 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole and later died in prison. His victims' bodies were never found. Police suspect that he hid them in one of the many abandoned mines in Nevada.